Everyone knows the story of Vergil, a man desperate for power and will stop at nothing to get it. Has anyone wondered perhaps there was a greater reasoning for this? Perhaps he wanted this power for a much more noble reason than the fans had ever thought of. What if Vergil actually went to find power for his son, Nero? Now I appreciate this theory is gonna be fairly radical and will require the benefit of the doubt, but I would like to believe by the end of this I can perhaps convince some of you that it might just be possible. I had originally posted this theory on Reddit. Given the positive feedback, I felt like I only skimmed the surface and actually had a lot more to say. This theory has a certain beauty to it, almost poetic. Of course this will be biased as it is my own theory, but I hope to convince you, so let's begin, shall we? The earliest we can trace back Vergil's story is to the night of his mother's death. Feeling useless and ashamed of his weakness, that this is what originally convinces Vergil that power is necessary in order to protect the ones you love. This is what originally sets him in the quest for power, searching the world for any information of his father or means to gain his father's power. Upon hearing of Fortuna, Vergil's curiosity led him to traveling to the island and exploring the religious city. During this visit he meets a woman. It is a general belief that this woman was a prostitute, as everyone in the city seems to be aware of who and what is, and everyone seemed to know each other. The fact that no one knew who Nero's mother was would seem to suggest that she was a prostitute. But what if this woman in fact wasn't a prostitute? What if Vergil actually had feelings for her, and knowingly got her pregnant? Vergil is never said to hate humans. He just sees them as weak. That is important because it allows Vergil to love a human, much like his father did. Also, I'd like to believe Vergil is more of a serious guy, and wouldn't have random one-night stands. It just doesn't feel like it would suit the character if he was some sort of sexual deviant. Reflecting on his own past, and how his mother had died because of weakness, he knew he had to do better. Desperate to prevent history from repeating itself, losing another family, he leaves Fortuna, and is now determined to seek power so his family is safe. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would Nero's mother abandon her child? Well, actually it's simple. Vergil explained to her who he was, his past and his biggest fear. He left her with a contingency plan. If he failed to come back with more power, abandon Nero, and that would ensure his safety. No one would question who his parents are, and people would believe he is simply the child of a nobody. The whole pregnancy was kept secret, because could you imagine the consequences of people being aware of Nero's existence? It is said in the Devil May Cry 4 graphic novel that Vergil meets Sanctus in Fortuna. Well, at least it's heavily implied. So if so, it would be very easy for Sanctus to connect the dots and would exploit Nero for his lineage. If people assume Nero was a child of a prostitute, then much less questions would be asked. A single mother with a white-haired son in Fortuna would be way too suspicious, especially considering Vergil was seen 9 months earlier. If everyone in Fortuna knew each other, then the lady would be known to Sanctus, giving Nero away from day one. So Vergil starts his quest to seek power, trying to return to his newfound love and unborn child with the strength he needs to make sure they are safe. He's obviously going to feel very paranoid about this, as he will have constant flashbacks of his mother. This is when he meets Arkham, who tells him sweet little lies to convince Vergil that Timothy Grew will have the power he seeks.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies.
Unaware at first of Arkham's real plan to have the power for himself, Vergil continues, and they work side by side. Of course, Vergil eventually catches on to his plan and kills Arkham, at least so he thought. Now there are a couple implications here. Dante mentions it's been about a year since they last met, and also it makes no sense to why Vergil doesn't explain why he's looking for power. Well, I would like to think Dante and Vergil had encountered each other in a similar fashion to the original Devil May Cry novel. But I do have to mention that the novel seems to have been retconned in a few places, and it's meant to be taken with a grain of salt. I believe that Vergil cares for Dante, but believes him to be weak for denying his demonic half and choosing to live life as a human. Vergil probably felt a little bit insulted by this, as he feels Dante did not care for their mother's death as much as he did. This would explain why they got into conflict in the first place. Right after the conflict, he then travels to Fortuna, meaning that the events of Devil May Cry 3 were probably just around 9 months after Vergil leaves Fortuna. As to why Vergil doesn't just tell Dante the truth about Nero, There are a few good reasons that would not break the canon. Vergil probably thought that Dante would still disagree with his plan to gain power, arguing that Vergil will not need it. Vergil also probably knew that telling Dante would mean that Dante would try to take care of Nero himself. As mentioned before, Vergil thinks it is weak that Dante accepts his human side. In Vergil's mind, he thinks that Sparta was powerful because he was a demon. On paper it makes sense, and just because Vergil has that opinion, it doesn't mean he's right. But either way, that's what Vergil believed, and in his mind it would be stupid to tell Dante and expose Nero to the threat that Dante would bring. Dante would feel obligated to take care of Nero, which would put a target on Nero's back, and Nero would never be safe. So why didn't Vergil tell Dante once he was defeated at the end of Devil May Cry 3, since Dante would be more powerful than him? Well, it's simple. It's not like Dante had won by a long shot. Vergil wasn't completely destroyed, he was just given a rather bad paper cut. Vergil was looking for power that would make him confident that he can't be defeated. Arguably, Dante would lose to Mundus at the end of Devil May Cry 3. It's the time that passes till Devil May Cry 1 that gives Dante the leverage over Mundus. This is why it's best to keep Nero a secret altogether, since enemies of Dante would try attacking Nero just to get to Dante. Once again, I'd like to clarify, just because Vergil believes his human side is weak, does not mean he dislikes humans. It'd be a little bit dumb if he hated humans, as his mother was one. It was like a mixed race kid putting a no blacks allowed sign on his front door. There'd be confusion from both white and black people. So why would Vergil stay in hell? And why on earth would he fight Mundus? Well, it's simple. He knew hell was the source of power for most demons. Maybe he could find power in hell as a last ditch attempt. Deciding to fight Mundus was simply a means to an end. If he could defeat Mundus, then he would be at the top of the food chain. He could rest assured knowing that his family would be safe and his quench for power would come to an end. If he failed to defeat Mundus, then he does not deserve to return to his son, as he would be ashamed of himself for failing. Even if he decided to return empty-handed with no power, he would be paranoid that one day demons will attack and that Nero will die. It is better for Nero to live an orphan than to die as Vergil's son. Through all of Devil May Cry 4, Vergil seems to act as a guardian angel to Nero, which would only make sense if Vergil cared for his son. There are a few interesting things that prove to us that Vergil has been there for Nero spiritually, since he was not able to be there physically. Especially after the whole "oh boy, I'm a slave to Mundus" fiasco. In the Devil May Cry 4 novelization, it is seen that right after Nero is stabbed by Agnes, and right before he pulls his devil trigger, he has a somewhat dreamlike encounter with a mysterious man. Now bear with me because the translation I have for the novel is not the best, so I'll try and interpret what I can from it. So the man asks Nero what his soul is looking for, and Nero pretty much goes ditto, what's yours looking for? The man answers by saying he wants more power. Once again, the translation could be a little bit better, but as you can see for yourself, it does seem to suggest that Nero asked for some of that power. Next thing you know, bingo banga bungo, he has his devil trigger and Yamato's in his hand. It's almost as if Papa Vergil helped his son gain access to this power. I mean, it could be argued that Nero's devil bringer is actually Vergil's doing. I mean, for crying out loud. Nero says himself in the very same scene in Devil May Cry 4 that when he got the arm, he heard a voice echo, "Give me more power." Now, if that's not good enough proof that Vergil is looking out for Nero and cares for him, then I have even more where that came from. Sorry if my pronunciation is wrong, but in the recently seen pachinko cutscenes, and for those unaware, Capcom for some reason created a slot machine for Devil May Cry 4, which featured better looking cutscenes for it than the actual game, which is a little funny, but it's obviously because of 10 years of technological advancements taking place. Nonetheless, in these pachinko cutscenes, there's one in particular that stands out for me. That would be the one where Nero is using Yamato, with glowing red eyes, connoting that his devil trigger is currently activated, but rather than having his normal devil trigger, you see the spirit of Vergil by his side. Almost as if he is helping Nero fight using Yamato. I'd like to add that Devil May Cry 5 had already started development ages ago. These cutscenes were released after Devil May Cry 5's announcement. That cannot be a coincidence. The developers are fully aware that Vergil is there and it has to have a meaning. I mean, if both of these did not have you convinced already, and if it is because both of these points could be derived as having evidence from non-canon sources, then fair enough. I'll give you one final little piece of evidence. In the end of Vergil's campaign in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, developed by Itsunobu Hideaki himself, director of Devil May Cry 2, 3, 4, and 5, you see Vergil walking at night in Fortuna, with his shadow being a silhouette of Nero's Devil Trigger, implying that it is Vergil's soul that is behind Nero when his Devil Trigger is active. Now everything up until this point is easily contradicted by one major hole in my theory. Or is it? In Devil May Cry 5 we see a cloaked figure, which at this point is impossible to deny that it is Vergil. Vergil then rips off Nero's arm, which seems to not be the most loving thing a father can do to his son. But there is a simple response that I have. What if Vergil had no choice but to do this? He clearly wanted Yamato back. But what for? Now before I continue, I have to warn you all of some pretty major spoilers that are going to come up. If you haven't been keeping up with leaks, then please skip to the time on the corner of the screen to avoid any spoilers. One final warning, and if you don't skip now you're going to hear some pretty bad stuff. If you're still here, then I have even more evidence to back up the fact that Vergil most likely did not take Nero's arm because he wanted to gain power for himself. It is seen in the leaked intro of the game that Vergil mentions he is running low on time. He even goes out of his way to say this out loud, so Nero can be given a small reason as to why Vergil had to do that. We all know Vergil isn't the kind to apologize for his actions, but he had no reason to give any kind of explanation to Nero. He could have easily just left without saying anything. It wouldn't make any difference for him. And obviously he didn't elaborate on it, he didn't explain exactly what he's running low on time for, but he did give a small explanation. It may have just been a typical anime thing where a character talks to themselves, but there's a good possibility that maybe Vergil did feel bad and felt he owed Nero that little information. I mean, for all we know, Vergil may have wanted to do things a lot more peacefully, but if he was short on time and was trying to prevent something big, like the rise of a powerful demon Urizen, then it isn't like he's going to explain who he is. I mean, if my theory is true, then Vergil has been watching Nero for a long time. He knows Nero wouldn't believe him, and either way, he wouldn't give up Yamato so easily. Vergil did what had to be done. Also, if you've seen the leak regarding Nero's Devil Bringer being in the game, and you caught the glimpse of Nero having 2 arms in the VGA trailer, you can tell Nero recovers his Devil Bringer and is most likely gonna use it in his true Devil Trigger form. I mean, Nero has no Devil Trigger from the start of the game, since he loses his arm, which is most likely Vergil's doing. Meaning, how can Vergil's soul look over Nero if Vergil has taken that piece of his soul back? Meaning that spirit over Nero when he activates his Devil Trigger can no longer be there because that was Vergil. So it is highly likely that Nero bumps into his papa during Devil May Cry 5, making it very likely that Vergil did his best to give his son back his power, and return what he took from the beginning of the game. Back to being spoiler free now, and just referencing the Hyde collaboration trailer, which only seems to suggest rather than give us factual evidence of things. You notice that Nero does this double slash attack with Red Queen, which seems really odd because he feels like he's missing another weapon in his hand. And it's most likely that this weapon is Yamato, his signature second weapon from Devil May Cry 4, and of course Vergil's own weapon, which is somewhat passed on to him by Dante. I would think that Urizen cannot be Vergil if this is the case, because it's clearly seen right here that Nero is using this double slash attack on Urizen, and there is no chance that Urizen would have the weapon easily accessible, as in you'd have to kill him to get Yamato if it was Vergil, and there is no chance that Urizen gave it willingly to Nero. So why would Urizen do that? It seems like he'd be shooting himself in the foot, and that's one really huge reason why I think he cannot be Vergil. My best guess is that Vergil gives back Yamato either directly or indirectly, possibly sacrificing himself, which I don't think so, just saying he could, and passing it down as an heirloom to Nero. Either way, the trailer made it out to be that Vergil is evil, as in the main trailer, the announcement trailer, because he's taking Nero's arm. And I think that's not the case, because Itsuno Hideaki himself, along with Matt Walker, they want us to think that. And I think they're trying to give us false information here on what's actually going on. So what does it all mean for Devil May Cry? Or for Vergil? Would it even be a good thing to add this story arc into the franchise? All these questions can only really be answered by you, the community. Honestly, I'm more than happy with just getting a true sequel to Devil May Cry. If this theory ends up being true to at least a certain extent, I personally believe that Vergil's character would be more deserving of his own game than ever before. Virgil's endless hunger for power is actually desperation to prevent making the same mistakes as his father. Ironically, his quest for power made him disappear just as his own father had. The beauty in this is that it adds a completely different perspective to Vergil in Devil May Cry 3, making the players wonder to themselves if he really is a villain, or just a father who will stop at nothing to ensure his child's safety. Thank you for sticking through to the end of my video. I hope to have perhaps convinced a handful of you, but most importantly, I hope you enjoy the theory regardless. I apologize for my microphone quality and my editing skills. I really don't usually make videos. I hope the countdown to Devil May Cry 5 is short and sweet. Hopefully we won't feel like it's too long. Maybe I'll even do a follow-up video after it releases, depending if my theory has any standing left. I bid you farewell. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay motivated.